She came roaring onto the scene a couple of years ago with her insightful LinkedIn posts about leadership. A shining example of "don't take my kindness for weakness" motto. She leads with empathy, but a clear vision of success. Welcome, Jami Alexander, to the Fixed Ops Mastermind.
Thank you for having me.
Jami, it's great to have you here. Take 2 minutes and introduce yourself, and then we'll get straight into the wisdom.
Perfect. I am Jami Alexander. I am going on my 28th year in the industry. I've got I work in the aftermarket side of things. I've got experience in, parts, operations manager, anywhere from small trucks to 18 wheelers and hydraulic boom experience. Most recently, I have been working for a Meineke, organization over the last 5 years. I started running 4 stores in the Portland, Oregon metro area, grew that to 7 within 4 years. And most recently, I am overseeing 9 Meineke locations for an independent owner in between North and South Carolina.
Excellent. All right. And today, 3 topics. First segment is leadership and growth. Segment 2, training and development. And segment 3, industry experience and insights. So, segment 1, leadership and growth. You've grown to operate Meineke locations. What key leadership principles have helped you successfully manage such a large operation?
Well, I think the key leadership for me has been, being able to balance empathy and compassion with, holding and setting to expectations. Uh, for me, with running several different, centers at the same time, it's super important that I lead from a place where I understand a person's personality, what their motivators are, taking the time to understand what success looks like to them individually,
Mhm.
because success is very different to very many people, and motivators is not always money. And I think when we take the time to understand that, we'd be surprised how often it's truly not money that's a motivator for people. Uh, so being able to, find ways that way, and then being able to integrate, the one process, but in a learning style that, meets the individual needs, has been the most successful for me. And, as frustrating as this industry can get and how challenging the objections are, you have to save, as a leader, you have to save the reserve energy to never back down on process. You have to fight that fight every time.
That's a huge thing, right? It is because I was talking on another show with Don Andres, and we were talking about you have what the process is and what the process actually comes out as, right? And
Mhm.
and sometimes we're weak in that middle point, so that what the process is supposed to be looks nothing like what the process is that's being performed.
Well, I think what happens a lot of time that creates that is communication. I think sometimes we over communicate to a point where we complicate it. And so being clear and concise, and having that direction of how it's supposed to be, helps resolve that. Otherwise, you're just like that old fashioned game of telephone. You start here and you end here, and you're like, where did that message come from? And as leaders, a lot of times we don't want to accept that that's on us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great point. The communication starts and ends with us, right? Um, I had a long time ago. We drew a little funny cartoon that it had the buck stop, and it had the guy standing there as the service manager,
Mhm.
because the buck always does stop with you, right?
Right.
Um, so Jami, you've got multiple locations, different, same general location, but a bigger area. Um, how do you cultivate strong team culture across those locations? And what strategies do you use to keep your managers and technicians engaged in that culture?
Well, that's a great question, and that is one of the biggest struggles with having a multi-center operation. So for me, it's being able to allow and identify that every center is their own ecosystem. Their skill set base from their technicians, managers, and even their customer base is going to be different. So realistically, I'm not capable of seeing all 9 locations every day, and there's sometimes, depending on the issues or the attention needed, I'm not able to see them, for a couple weeks, and so having a messaging platform that brings everybody together as a vision of one is super important to me. We have a daily text stream that we use. I like to send out. I like to start the day with a very encouraging, inspiring message. And I always like to end the day with thanking the team for another day, another fight in the fight. Let's call it what it is. This industry sometimes is about fighting the fight, fighting through it. And one thing that I am really big on, which you've seen through some of my posts and some of the personal conversations we've had, is we have to build that bridge between the counters and the shops. And
Yeah.
so I spend a lot of time with my managers in particular with ways to be able to do that and to understand where each one's coming from
Hmm.
and being able to empathize with each other, walk in each other's shoes. And when they can do that, we become like a checks and balance system. So if the shop is able to recognize a manager's weakness, or a manager is able to identify a weakness in the shop, they'll work together to keep themselves out of trouble if they're building, the common ground that they need to be doing.
Hmm. Excellent. I love that, and you've sent me some of those morning messages that you've shared with your team, and they are definitely inspirational, and it's great for them to be able to start their day out with that positive message from their leadership.
Yeah, this is a tough business. It's, well, I mean, it's kind of an oxymoron, but it's actually the simplest business or industry. We just tend to make it tougher than it needs to be.
Yeah,
And it never fails. It rains or pours. You either have the technician upset because that wheel stud broke during a tire rotate, and so 20 minutes turned into an hour, or you've got a manager who's frustrated because upon teardown, they didn't do their job of explaining what incidentals can happen.
sure.
And so they get mad at each other instead of being able to just be, upset with the issue, but find ways to push through with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that all comes back to that process, right? That we talked about earlier. So can you share a challenging leadership moment you faced while trying to expand the business? You talked earlier about starting with 4 stores and grew that to 7, I think you said, in 4 years. That's a lot of growth. And how you overcame those challenges.
The one that sticks out to me the most was the last location that we acquired up in the Pacific Northwest. It was a previous tire shop that really just focused on only tires, and alignments. And so it already had, a bit of a reputation. And in the Pacific Northwest in particular, staffing has been an issue for several years. It's been really hard to get staffing. And to add insult to injury, I was implementing the auto vitals inspection process across all locations as well. So, in typical Jamie fashion, go big or go home, and a new operating system. So it was very, very fun. But I think the most challenging part with that was we were able to immediately staff, but the staff was not mixing and meshing well together. So there was a lot of infighting that was going on. There was a lot of change that was happening. Even though it was a manager that had been with our organization for a while that I put in there, he was really struggling with the change aspect, feeling frustrated with the technicians and the fronts not being able to work well together.
Hmm.
So it was a really challenging time for me because I had to be uber sensitive to being able to balance my present with my presence.
Mm.
and be empathetic to all the changes and the challenges, but still hold true to the expectations.
Hmm.
Because the last thing that I wanted to do was open up a new center and start picking and choosing what process pieces I was gonna not pay attention to, because
Yep.
all that will do is continue chaos long term.
Right.
So it was a lot of counseling, a lot of one-on-one. It was a lot of explaining the whys, because I think that we get ourselves in trouble in this industry because we spend too much time getting upset because the hows aren't happening, but we don't take enough time to explain the whys.
Yeah.
And so I had to be very methodical. I had to not back down on the process, but I had to show where each time that there was a disconnect, probably 99% of the time I was able to put that back to a process disconnect. And had
Hmm.
we done this wouldn't happen. So I once we got the right mix in there and they understood the expectations. The hardest part about that was, I'll never forget, it was one day and we'd had enough with the auto vitals. I was kind of at my end, and a technician sent up an inspection for an oil change, and it was literally pictures of four corners in the dash. No pictures for the struts that were recommended, no pictures for the water pump and the timing belt, nothing. And I knew I had to take a stance. So I went out and they had a stool because I'm short, um, in the shop. And I stood on the stool and I was like, time out, stop production. And we were busy. We were very, very busy. And everybody stops. They're like, we're busy. What's going on? And I said, well, what's going on is I'm either going to sell an oil change and an oil change only. I said, or I'm going to have a proper inspection before I present these items. I
Hmm.
said, this defeats the purpose of transparency. This defeats the purpose of the customer experience. And I said, we've already set the expectation once with this customer. They've been gracious enough to come back and give us another try, and we're not going to blow it.
Hmm.
And they were mad. I mean, there was, I've got a rule. I have a rule. You can say whatever you want as long as I don't hear it. And I could hear they were mad, but they did the inspection props appropriately. It
Yep.
turned into a $2,800 ticket, and the customer was very happy that we were able to show them the concerns and give explanations why they needed to be done.
Yeah, and that's, as I said in the introduction, that's your don't mistake my kindness for weakness, right? You can have empathy for what they're going through on a daily basis, but you can't have weakness in maintaining what the process is supposed to be.
No.
And so that's a perfect segue into segment two, which is training and development. This segment is brought to you by Automotive Warranty Network Incorporated, family owned and operated claims management service based out of Denver, Colorado. They currently process more than 100 million in warranty per month. Jami Alexander, you are known for believing in constant training. How do you structure your training programs, and what areas do you focus on the most?
So this area is personal to me because I think that training is something that we confuse, and we put a lot of people in front of a computer with interactive training on the computer. That sounds nice for the word
Hmm.
tracks and everything else, but I've not seen one that truly helps with real time in the fire, in the trenches objections.
Right.
And most people don't learn that way. I don't. I learn hands on.
Hmm.
I have to be tactical and tangible in my learning. So, one thing that I do is I believe in live in the trenches training, side by side, being able to catch things in real time and being able to give examples and get them to where they need to be. So for me, training is, I think that we also overcomplicate and we expect too much. We flood our
Hmm.
managers with too much information. And so the most important training aspects for me are, is I have three KPIs that I live and die by. One is call success, or success with the call, getting that customer conversion, and then our digital inspection and our AWRO versus our ARO. And those all play in together. And when you can get those three in line, you'll automatically see everything else come in line. And then you can, from then on out, you can dissect each individual center and see where people are struggling in other areas, and you can work on that on a personalized individual level with those locations. So uh, so phone process is something that I talk about daily. I send out 3 reports a week. One is the auto vitals, inspection of all the areas, how many pictures, what were the recommendations. And then I also break that down and I can actually look at the technician effectiveness report. Because
Mhm.
I'm not a believer that we should sell more oil filters or we should sell more wiper blades. I think that those are shady practices, and I think it takes away from the uh, total what we're trying to achieve.
Mhm.
And so, I believe when we do a detailed, structured inspection process each time and every time, you get consistency across the board. So, my South Carolina location inspection should look just like my farthest North Carolina location, right?
Yes.
And if they're hitting all the touch points like they're supposed to, we're going to automatically see everything come up and in those, acceptable things. So I like to
Mhm.
focus on jobs per ticket, not more air filters and, wiper blades. And one thing that I do that I think is different than most, not all, but most from some of the things that I see is I work in the shops too. I take the time to be out there in the shops and to explain the whys and to stop things in real time and let them know why this is important. This
Yeah.
is why we need to do this. And
Mhm.
then I'll flip flop on the front end. And a lot of times I'll bring a technician if we're not super busy up to the front end so the technicians can see and understand why what they do is so important for what we do up here to make sure that everybody's growing, not only the company but their paychecks and their excitement level and their growth development.
Yeah, that's a huge factor is getting out into the shop and then integrating technicians and advisors back together. Right, because you get the catch 22 scenario of a technician's going to say, well, I'm not going to spend that much time doing this inspection because the advisor's not going to try and sell the work, right? And the advisor's going, well, I'm not bothering to try and sell the work because they don't really do good inspections, right? And now
Right.
you're self-defeating yourselves.
Well, and training for me or growth for me is we have to get back to owning our own development.
Hmm.
And we all have to be able to start with accountability, and accountability starts within. If we're not being held accountable to ourselves and to I'm a very structured person. I have a morning routine that I do every morning, and I have a hard time staying on track if I'm out of that routine. So I think the more that we can focus on getting them to own their own development, be
Hmm.
accountable to themselves, then you start seeing the accountability form within the shops, because you have to foster it's okay to have tough conversations, because a lot of times anything in life is cause and effect. So
Yeah.
if the manager is doing something counterproductive to the shop, there is a little bit of sometimes it does take that little bit of irritation and that Norman Foreman storm in between the two
Yeah.
to be able to work it out. Because I'm only in there certain times during the week or weeks, but
Hmm.
they got to work with each other every day. And as leaders, we can't put our thumbs on that. We can just give coping skills and ideas and areas to improve that, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're talking about that little bit of irritation. I had a service manager who, um, he was an assistant service manager the first time I worked with him when I was a service advisor, and I went on to work with him at three other dealerships, I believe. But I used to call him the wool sweater, because if you put a wool sweater on without a long sleeve shirt, it's just that constant little itchy, right? It's just a little itchy, little irritation all day long, and that's what I used to call him. But his effect was worthwhile and worked well, right? He was never really in your stuff, but just enough to give you that little bit of irritation to make sure that you kept going, right? That you kept moving.
Oh, that's a solid point, and I think that we miss that with leaders. I mean, we have to be able to empower the team to overcome objections. We have to empower them to handle some of their situations, and
Hmm.
and also if you have a team member that is continuously making the same mistakes, So you have to be able to let them have, make them feel like they have some skin in the game. You've got
Yeah.
to help them get through. They've got to learn to be uncomfortable or being comfortable with in their uncomfortable, but they also need to feel what their actions and their disconnects are causing everybody. And you know, it's not my job as a leader, if I want to continue to grow my career, is I need to grow more leaders.
Yeah.
And I don't need to micromanagement, and I'm not wanting to grow blind followers. I want people to disagree with me. I want to have those conversations because that's how change truly happens.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I saw a quote. I don't know who to attribute it to, but it said if you think you're a leader, and nobody is following you, you're just out for a walk.
Yeah,
You're not leading. Uh,
yeah.
and so, Jamie, we'll switch gears a little bit. In an industry that's rapidly evolving with new technologies, we talked a little bit before we started recording about AI stuff. How do you ensure your team stay up to date with the latest skills and knowledge that they need?
Well, I think that where we're getting ourselves in trouble with technology in this industry is there's so much coming at us at once. You know,
Hmm.
there's always a new development for this is going to make you do this is going to make you do that. So, for me personally, it's important to utilize the technology with systems that work well together. Many times I've been in different, you know, organizations or with conversations that I've had with people where they're all over the board. They're not integrating correctly and nobody knows how to effectively use them.
Hmm.
Technology is not something that I'm great at. I really have a hard time. Once I understand it and I understand how it's supposed to work, then I do great with being able to roll it out. So for us, we use the Auto Vital system for most of our technology. It integrates great with our tech metric. It has one of the best reporting features. It has a direct to customer platform that personalizes, future work, or when we ask guests to come back to get, some recommended services done. So I think that is the biggest piece for us. But I also think that we need to do a better job of holding our vendors accountable. I mean, all these systems come with, we're purchasing a product from somebody else. And
Yeah.
a lot of times that we just kind of get shown and we're scared to reach out to our vendors, or we're scared to reach out to the account rep. Not me. I'm too busy within the fire daily stuff. I hold the account reps accountable.
Yeah.
Look, I'm going to be here. I'm going to push your product, but these are my expectations. I need this, this, and this, and this, from you, and I need it. I need it these times, and
Hmm.
that way it keeps it fresh and it keeps the continual training. Or as changes are happening, or if we see a disconnect in one of the numbers, I can reach out directly to that account rep and say, either help me figure it out, or can we do another session with so and so.
Yeah. That's great, and it's so important to continue that communication. I am on that vendor side. We consider ourselves partners with who we do business with, not a vendor, and we want that as a partnership. I'm here to help you do better things. And with that comes you communicating back to me about things that you need us to do differently, or things that you don't understand that we're doing for you. So that's great.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's just like anything else, it's a tool,
Right.
right? And the tool itself is not going to make you successful unless you're successfully using it to its abilities, and maximizing every key point that they say is going to help you grow. And how you can't even keep accurate data if you're not.
Exactly. And that's been a big problem in our industry is either inaccurate data, or just not using the data that's available because we don't understand the tools that we're using.
Correct. We can't say if this, we bring on a new product, if we're not utilizing it to its full potential or understanding it, then we don't know if it's truly helping or hurting us. And that puts, to your point with partnerships, because I'm the same way, our vendors should be partners. That
Hmm.
puts our partner at an unfair advantage if we're not taking it and running with it and doing what we need to.
Right. Absolutely. And so, have you implemented any innovative training methods for your advisors that have been particularly effective at your locations?
I don't think that there's really anything innovative about training personally. And so, I don't want to sound arrogant on that, but I
Yeah.
think that if we step back and we look at all of our processes, they really haven't changed, right?
Hmm.
And they're pretty much industry standard, whether you're in a dealership or whether you're in an independent shop. So I don't think there's anything innovative other than I am willing to get my hands dirty. I'm willing to be in the trenches, and I'm willing to hold to to the expectations on it. But I think that we overthink this area too hard, and again, just kind of like a product or a platform, it's only going to be as good as it's effectively messaged and used, right?
Hmm.
So I'm pretty persistent and consistent with process. It's daily, it's wherever I'm at. It's just right there, it's stopping it in real time and being able to course correct instead of letting things build up.
Yeah, I think just maintaining process is innovative.
Yeah, yeah, it's half my battle. It
Yeah,
truly is half my battle.
yeah. Um, and I think you're right. There's not really much that's going to be considered new in training and development. Obviously, again, we talked about AI, and there's some things that are happening with AI to help enhance how people learn. Um, but as you said earlier, there's nothing that you can really sit and watch to teach you objection handling until you're there going back and forth with another human being over objections. And yes, you can use strategies that you've learned, but you won't be able to effectively put those into practice until you're actually there going through those exercises.
Well, correct. And I think that we also do a disservice because we do focus, for those of us that do focus on understanding individuals' personalities and, being able to train that way. I think we need to do a better job of teaching that on the front end of things too, because every customer is different. Their
Yes.
needs are different. And, and so, we have to balance the technology, but still keep the personal. And we need to take a moment to still find that common ground, make things easy, offer solutions. It's not our job to sell. It's our job to present, and
That's
it's
it.
to inform and to give options. And, many times, financing is a big topic right now within my organization. And I've got some kickback because we do have some higher rate financing options. And, I hear this, well, I'm not going to offer that because I don't believe in it. But we have to step back from that. If the guest's only option is that to keep their vehicles safe and to keep their children safe,
Mhm.
we're not their financial advisors. We're here to help them with solutions. And, to have a high rate financing platform that allows for a 90-day same as cash for somebody that has been in credit challenges, regardless of the issue, why, that's not for us to judge, right?
Right.
It's we're giving them an option to keep them and their children and their families safe and other people safe on the road. They
Mhm.
can't always just go out and trade in a car and buy a brand new car, especially
Right.
at today's rates.
Yeah, and as you said, that's not our choice to make. All we can do is present the solution. We can explain that yes, it is a higher interest rate, right? But if that's the situation that they're in their life, then that may be what they have to do. And if they can't fix the car, maybe they can't even get to work to make money to be able to fix the car in the future. And now they're in a worse spiral, right?
Correct.
So
And with the, what is it? I mean, what is it? They're saying 14.1 years now is the average age of a
yeah,
vehicle now being on the road. We have to be able to offer those solutions. And then we have to be able to step back and let them decide
yes.
on what's best for their situation because we don't know. We don't know.
Nope. We have no idea, and that's not for us to decide. We can only
Mhm.
present the options available for them to be able to make a decision that is personal to them.
Correct.
Yeah. And so now we move into segment three, which is industry experience and insights. And so you're on the aftermarket side, if you will, now, but you had some experience working in a dealership not that long ago. How has that brief stint influenced your approach to running your Meineke franchises now?
That was a very eye-opening experience for me, being able to cross paths into the dealership world. One thing that I noticed is it's no surprise why customers are defecting to the aftermarket side of things.
Mm.
The ease of appointment is a nightmare in the dealership world. Just from my experience, I'm not saying it's
Yep.
everybody, but from my experience, not having people properly trained, the appointment scheduler wasn't properly trained to understand the difference between a safety and an inconvenience, because sometimes you do have to take in work based on the safety versus inconvenience, because that's our first
Sure.
and foremost job. And I will tell you, the one thing that really stood out to me the most about working in the dealership is they do a fantastic, way better job than we do in the aftermarket of selling hours.
Mm.
They're just as deficient on whether or not they're smart hours or not. Which I'm sure everybody can agree with me in this industry can be. We can talk ELR, we can talk all that stuff, customer pay hours, all we want, but we all know our production isn't where we're supposed to be, and those numbers
Mhm.
can be manipulated, right?
Right.
Um, so one thing that I took with me from leaving there and coming into this organization, where back home I didn't have assistant managers, where because our stores are so spread out here, most of my locations have assistant managers. So I am taking the dealership approach in the stores that have assistant managers, and I'm piloting it right now in one of my locations, where I've got the assistant manager working directly in the shop.
Hmm.
So they are in charge of dispatching the work. They are in charge of catching the digital inspection disconnects in real time and being able to kick it back before it goes
Mhm.
up to the front. And they're also building the estimates. So focus on the estimates. They're not bothered with the phones. They're not bothered with people walking in. I shouldn't say bothered. That's a bad
Right.
word, but they don't have they don't have those distractions to where we can make sure that the inspection rate is top notch
Yep.
and that those estimates are correct, because I think many times people forget in this industry that these labor times are as if these vehicles came off the factory line brand new.
Right.
And
Yep.
it is not price gouging. It is not being unfair to account for the rust. It is
Mhm.
not being unfair to set the customer up for the 5 quart exhaust studs that always break, right?
Right.
And so the more information that we can give that guest upon the estimate approval, the
Mhm.
better we are. Our hope is that we're not going to have any break. But if they do, you're looking at this much more per,
Right.
bolt. And I think that it also prevents one of my biggest pet peeves that I see in this industry is we could be taking care of a guest car for 5 or 6 oil changes, telling them everything is perfect. And then you get that new technician that comes in and does an accurate, proper inspection.
Yep.
And all of a sudden they need $6,000 worth of work.
Yeah.
And we look totally incompetent, because why were not they not set up for this before? Why were these not going into future recommendations
Yep.
and things like that?
Yeah, and that is an instant trust loss from
Mhm.
that customer to us, that you will never get back. Even if they do come back to your store, they will never have the level of trust in you that they had before that happened.
No, absolutely not. And I've been piloting this. So I've only been here, I think I'm going on 2 months. So I've been piloting this for a while. And I will tell you that we've seen a 24% inspection rate increase
Wow.
within this location. And we're seeing this particular location was having a problem with being inconsistent
Mhm.
up and down, which I attributed to inspections, because we weren't planting the seeds for the future work and the retention.
Yep.
And so we are going on 6 weeks of consistent numbers as opposed to coming down. And so I do feel
Yeah.
this is working. And once I have more accurate data and I see that this is going to work, I'm going to implement it across the stores, because I also think that it gives a good feel and vibe that the technicians know that they have a management position in their shop that
Yep.
is there to help them and be there for them and be able to see things in real time, so we can better appreciate what the technicians go through.
Yeah, that's awesome. I asked you the question earlier of innovative training things that you were doing. I should have asked that question, because that's an innovative way to look at your operation that hasn't been there before. Um, so you covered a bunch of them, but what are a couple of key differences that you've observed between the dealership model and the aftermarket service model, and how have those insights shaped your business strategies now? And I think you kind of just went over a big one, but
Well, the other one is warranty. Warranty with the dealership world versus us is it's just challenging. That was something with not having, the warranty administrative experience. That was a big challenge for me. And one difference between the two worlds is, in my world now, we get smart really quick what to work on and what not to. And so we do have the advantage of kicking something back to the dealership.
hmm
But we also, we we do a better job in the aftermarket world of just being able to say yes and get the job done for the customer, where the dealership makes it very hard to do. Whether it be, a supply chain issue, you're held to your one vendor. Yes, you can use aftermarket in certain cases, but that's not the case for warranty work, and things like that. So it
hmm
really made me appreciate the aftermarket side of things. But also, what I think too is we do learn when to use, the OEM parts where it makes sense. So I mean, we still, even though we're aftermarket and we're dealership, we're still very much,
yeah,
intertwined as an industry as one. So I think, it would be the ease of the appointment, the parts ordering, and then just efficiency in general.
yeah. Excellent. Yeah, and from the dealership side, there are certainly times when the either the OEM doesn't have the part, like it doesn't exist. Not that you can't order it and it's on back order, that it doesn't exist and you need it and you have to go aftermarket, and maybe that's to solve a warranty issue. Um, you know, Jeeps have a notorious front end issue that can
Yep.
only be solved by putting in a dampener that the OEM has never made, right? But that vehicle might be under warranty with that shake, and you need to fix that vehicle. So
Right.
there's
And yeah, and I think that, to be fair, I think sometimes the manufacturers put the dealerships in unfair situations.
hmm
Because they are holding them too, but they need to do a better job of making sure that they are resourceful and they're writing contracts with their supply chains, and that
right,
there's clauses in for like force majeure or strikes,
yeah,
and or COVID shutdowns and things like that, to continue to make sure, because the guest experience in the dealership is only going to be as good as the commitment from the manufacturer and the commitment from the dealership level, in my opinion.
yeah, absolutely. And honestly, the customer could care less about all that stuff. They care
Right.
only about that experience, and that's all they should care about, right? I don't order something from Amazon and care that they had 27 people that called in sick that day, and so they can't deliver the thing. I ordered it. It said it would be here on Tuesday by 10 p.m. and it's not. That's all and the customer sees the same thing in our dealerships.
That's so fair. And in the dealership side of things, they focus too much on the why they can't and the blaming everyone else to the
Yes.
customer. They actually, I heard it, well, it's because based on this or what. We got to stop that. We're there
Yeah.
to be a solution, and follow up. The other thing that the dealerships really struggled with was follow up. I wanted to pull my hair out.
hmm
Too many times guests were calling, what's the update?
Yeah.
I don't care what it is. No news, good news, or bad news. No customer should be calling our shops wanting to know a status on their vehicle. We are not doing our job, and it's completely unacceptable. And in the aftermarket side of things, well, at least under my leadership, that is something that's not tolerated.
Yeah. And so in a short stint in the dealership, you picked out probably the two biggest issues on the service side, which are scheduling is a nightmare, and follow up or customer communication is an issue. Those are two of the biggest things that if they were solved, the industry would be much different than what it is right now.
Well, yeah, and I think that the dealerships, they focus so much on the CSI, which is a good thing to have, and I
Sure.
understand why, and I understand all that. But also the other thing that I notice, in, at least in my experience, the dealerships also don't do a good job of hanging on to the older equipment or the older diagnostic tools and things like that. So just
Yep.
like in the aftermarket side, when we know when to send it to a dealer, the dealership can do a better job of understanding when to send and direct the customer to the aftermarket side,
Mm.
because there was many vehicles that were left behind that were,
Yep.
10, 13 years old, and I didn't have anybody that was able to work on them, and that just automatically sets up for that bad experience, and it ruins the brand, because
Yeah.
if the customer can't get their vehicle taken care of when they're due for a new vehicle, they're going to start questioning the brand, and we at the dealership level, we have to represent that brand well.
Absolutely. And then in defense of the dealership there of holding on to that equipment, the OEMs put out so much equipment, you'd almost need a whole other building just to keep equipment in to,
Correct.
to have
Yeah,
all
no,
of
that is fair. That
it.
that is an absolute fair statement. And that's why I'm saying understanding when we can meet the customer commitment and when we can't.
Yep.
Because it doesn't matter if we save a $1,600 sale, if we don't have the proper equipment and tools to make it happen,
Right.
or the equipment to properly diagnose it, we're gonna lose that $1,600 sale. We may bill it initially, but it's gonna cost us $3,200 to $3,500
Right.
by the time we're done, and we get the customer back on the road running, and then the customer doesn't want to come back.
Right. Right. It's a great point. All right, Jamie, last question. Looking at the broader automotive service industry, what changes do you foresee in the next 5 to 10 years, and how are you preparing your business for them?
So I think one of the biggest one, I mean, it could be debated back and forth, is the electric vehicles.
Hmm.
I think we're seeing more and more on them. I mean, whether or not it's going to be the market share that they say or not, I think we can still, is up in the air. But even in our industry, I've got two centers that are becoming electric vehicle certified. Got one in the Carolinas, and we've got one in the Wisconsin. We also own some in Wisconsin that we're doing to be better prepared for that. But I think the biggest thing that we're going to see is, I think we're going to see more self-service options. I think we've really gotten ourselves into a struggle in this industry with, customer experience, all the way starting from the phone call to the check-in process to the delivery process.
Hmm.
And I think we've lost a lot of consumer confidence. And in fairness, I think it's been on both sides of the, aftermarket or the OEM.
Yeah.
So I think that we're going to see more like kiosks. We're going to see more check-ins. We're going to see more of the AI of where you have a kiosk or some kind of where the customer checks in, that's going to automatically give their service
Hmm.
recommendations based on their mileage, and give them options, right at the check-in. So, because I mean, let's be real, some do really well at selling those in the drive, but most don't.
Right.
We're talking about and doing the walk around at the initial check-in. So I personally, I hope that my business doesn't go that way, because I still believe that the personal touch is very important. And being able to have that face to face and hear a phone call and a voice. But it's just continue the training and meeting the customer expectation. But I think that everyone's going to these kiosk things, and I don't see why we would not be immune to it.
Yeah, they certainly have a place, right? And there's a segment of customers that prefer to do business that way, right? That's something that we've been uh, not good at in the past is allowing customers to do business with us the way they want to do business with us.
That's a very fair statement, and that's why we should be doing that at check-in. How would you prefer? Would you prefer phone call? Would you prefer text?
Yes.
Email. What is the best way to get a hold of you? Because everybody, it doesn't matter what industry you're in anymore, finding and retaining good talent is hard. So
Hmm.
everybody's overworked. They're stretched thin, and so we have to do a better job of accommodating to them.
Absolutely. Jamie, it has been a pleasure having you here. Any final thoughts for the audience?
No, but I love this industry with all my heart, and I'm a small player in a big world, but I'm going to fight every day to make it as great as it can be.
Well, we love having you in the industry. We look forward to seeing more of your insights, especially on LinkedIn. I look forward every day to your positive outlook on things. And thank you again for joining us. And everybody, we will see you next week.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.